Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are breaking down the Saturday, December 30th slate of college football bowl games for DFS purposes on DraftKings and FanDuel. This is the sixth slate in a row that we are breaking down the college football bowl games. Bowl week is almost over, which kind of makes me sad a little bit because we've got this Saturday slate. And then we've got the Monday, New Year's Day slate, which includes the college football playoff games. And that will be the last big-time DFS slate of college football season. So college football is coming to a close, y'all. So let's make sure that we can end this out on a good note, end this out on a high. So here on this episode, I'm going to break down the 4 bowl games for Saturday and kind of go through how we can parse through all of the opt-outs and the transfer portaling and who's going to be playing and who should be in your DFS lineups and who should be out of your DFS lineups for this 4-game Saturday slate. And it is a lot to go through for this slate, y'all, because there is a lot going on with these 8 teams. Now, while you are here, if you've liked the college football content throughout this bowl season, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We're closing in on 300 subscribers. That is a milestone for us, and I would very much appreciate it. And subscribe to the audio feed as well if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcast. It really does help me out a lot. It helps the podcast get noticed, and I really do appreciate it. But I also encourage you to stick around. Don't just be here for college football season. We're going to be coming back with golf coverage next week with the first event of the PGA Tour season. We're going to be covering golf all throughout the season. We also had a big announcement with a one-and-done golf league, which you can check the previous videos, check the previous episodes on audio if you want more information about that. And then we're going to be back with college basketball content next week. So if you enjoy playing college football DFS, you should enjoy college basketball DFS also, because it's not as sharp as the other DFS sports, very similar to college football. There's a lot of lineup building principles in college football, like game stacking matchups that do play in college basketball as well. So I hope that you will come back for that content. So hit that subscribe button so that way you can come back once college football season is over. We also will have our Week 17 NFL episode releasing to the audio feed just after this one gets done. That one is going to be an audio-only episode. So if you're subscribed to the audio-only episode, or if you're subscribed to the audio feed, you can get that audio-only episode. All right, so we got 4 games to break down, and we do not have a whole lot of time to do it. Actually, we kind of do, but I want to do it pretty efficiently. So we're going to go ahead and get started talking about the first game of the day between Ole Miss and Penn State. All right, so the Chickfila Peach Bowl is being played between Ole Miss and Penn State. This game currently has a spread of Penn State minus 4.5 points. The total is 50.5, which is actually the highest game total on the slate. So the implied total is about 27-23 in favor of Penn State. I never do decimal points with implied totals because teams can't actually go out and score decimal points on the field. So about 27-23 is the expected total there. Now, here's the deal with this 4-game slate, y'all. These are 4 games that if they were on a main slate, like a 12, 11 game DraftKings main slate, I would be ignoring all 4 of these games. These are not 4 pretty games. These are not 4 games where there's a whole lot of value to be had. There's really just not a whole lot of attractive options at any position on this slate. When I sat down and started building lineups, the only position that I really felt comfortable about rostering 2 or 3 guys at was running back. Quarterback and wide receiver are pretty darn rough. So really, I think the strategy for this slate might be to stack up an individual team or an individual game and just hope and pray that that team is the one that goes off and that team is the one on the slate that scores 30-plus points, because I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of scoring on this slate in general. So Penn State and Ole Miss, these are the 2 teams that I genuinely have no idea what to make of them, because both of these teams come in at 10-2. Their losses were to 2 of the best teams in the country, respectively. Penn State lost to Ohio State and Michigan. Ole Miss lost to Alabama and Georgia. And their 10 wins haven't really been all that close. So these 2 teams exist in a space where they're not as good as the great teams in the country, but they're better than the lesser teams in the country. So I don't really know what to make of these 2 teams. I don't really know what to make of these 2 games. What I do know is that statistically, Penn State is one of the best defenses in all of college football. We've got Jax Dart coming in as Ole Miss's quarterback, priced all the way up at $9,000. And his performances over the course of the season warrant that price tag. He's shown a lot of upside. He's had 3 games over 35 fantasy points. He averages 24 fantasy points per game. That's pretty solid. But against good defenses, he wasn't all that great. We can look at those 2 games against Georgia and Alabama. He only had 5.5 fantasy points against Georgia. He only had 15.4 fantasy points against Alabama. So I just don't think that this is a great spot for Jax Dart. And I think that there's a big time likelihood that this Penn State defense makes him look like the Georgia and Alabama defenses did. And so for that reason, I'm probably only going to be playing Jack Dart in a game stack lineup as opposed to just playing him as one of the top quarterback plays on the slate, because at that price tag with this matchup, I don't think he is one of them. Drew Aller of Penn State is a slightly better play, in my opinion. Just with what he's done, he's had a decent season. Like, he's been very efficient. He's a pretty accurate. He has only thrown one interception, but from a fantasy perspective, it just hasn't been like super eye popping numbers, right? He scored over 24 fantasy points 3 times this season, which would be about 3 times value for his current salary. That's not bad, but we'd like to see that number a little more than 3 out of 12. And so I kind of think that he's not that great of a per dollar play, but like on this slate, I think he's kind of in play for me, especially in a game stack if you were to build it up where you were to play Dart and Hour. One thing that I do think is a word of caution with Dart, though, no quarterback has scored more than 22 fantasy points against Penn State all season long, and they played some pretty good ones. So if Jack Dart were to score more than 22 fantasy points against this defense, he would be the first. That's how good Penn State's defense has been. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the running backs. So Penn State has been annoying all season long. They have 2 really good running backs in Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. What's annoying is that they are one of the biggest 50-50 splits in terms of their running back production in all of college football. I mean, you look at over the course of the season, Singleton averages 14.1 fantasy points per game, and Kaytron Allen is 12.9 fantasy points per game. That's really similar. In the last 3 games, Kaytron Allen has slightly outperformed Nick Singleton. This is how close to 50-50 it is. In the last 3 games, Kaytron Allen has seen 43 carries. Nick Singleton has seen 42. In terms of fantasy scoring, Kaytron Allen has had 55 fantasy points in that span. Nick Singleton has only had 40. Because they've split carries so much, the 2 of them, both great backs in their own right, have only combined for 3 100-yard rushing games on the entirety of the season. But they do have a combined 9 games of 20 or more fantasy points. So 9 out of 12, 75% of the time, one of these 2 backs is going to get you 20 fantasy points. The question is, which one? I don't know. I genuinely don't. I guess I would lean Kaytron Allen because he is a little cheaper and he has been a little bit better lately. But this is a true 50-50 split where there is a little bit of upside, but there is no telltale sign of knowing which one is going to be the one that pops off. Now, on the Ole Miss side, things are a little clearer because they've got a workhorse running back in Quinshon Judkins, averaging about 20 carries per game, which is really high for the college ranks. He has been really, really consistent with his workload, and that is what I think makes him a solid play this week. He's had 17 carries in every game since week 4 against Alabama, and he hasn't shrunk against good defenses like Jack Dart has. He did have 7.6 against Alabama, which was a little bit of a disappointment. Got stopped at the goal line in that game. But then he did have 23.9 against Georgia. So if you can put up 24 fantasy points against Georgia, you can put it up against anybody. So Quinshon Judkins, because of his workload, is in play for me on this slate. I will give you the word of caution, though. Penn State's run defense has the best or the lowest yards per carry allowed in the country at 2.1 yards per carry. That is astoundingly low. So Quinshon Judkins is going to be an uphill battle because of the matchup, but the amount of workload that he gets makes him in play in my book. Now, the wide receiver position is going to be interesting. Ole Miss has some oddities going on here. So Zachary Franklin is not with the team, even though he's got a Q tag on DraftKings. I don't think he is going to play. And then after that, Dayton Wade has declared for the draft. However, he is still playing in the bowl game. He said in a press conference that he wants to play and that he is listed on the official bowl game depth chart. So Dayton Wade, priced at only $3,000 on DraftKings, he is playing in this bowl game. He is probably the best value play at the wide receiver position because he should not be priced at $3,000. Their other 2 starting receivers for Ole Miss are going to be Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins, who, when you look at their game log, both have had like big time performances this season. Trey Harris has had 3 games of 30 or more fantasy points. However, he has not been consistent at all. Jordan Watkins has been slightly more consistent, but without the same ceiling, but he does have 3 games of 24 or more fantasy points. So if you were playing Jack Dart, I feel like I would definitely stack him up with Harris, Watkins, or Wade. Wade is the easy choice because of his price tag. But I think that outside of a stack with Jack Dart, I would probably only be playing Dayton Wade from this wide receiving core for Ole Miss. They also do have a playable tight end, Caden Priestcorn. who was coming strong near the end of the season, ending the season with 13.8 and 18.9 fantasy points. So Caden Priestcorn would absolutely be in play for me at $4,800 as another option in this Ole Miss passing attack. Now for Penn State, pretty much over the course of the season, we talked about they have those two backs and they run those backs a lot. So there hasn't been a whole lot of passing volume for the Nittany Lions. And most of that passing volume has gone to one guy, and that is Keandre Lambert-Smith. He came out of the box like really hot week one with 31 fantasy points against West Virginia, has not seen really anything close to that the rest of the season, only 2 more games over 20 fantasy points. But he does command a massive target share. And I kind of think that if you're looking to stack it up, he's got to be the guy you stack it with, right? Because he is the guy that is going to get the lion's share of the targets. Because of how much he dominates the target share, I would also be willing to play him outside of a stack and play him without Drew Allar, because he has shown the ability to get there when Allar does not. Now, outside of Keandre Lambert-Smith, Harrison Wallace may be back for this game. We don't really know for certain on that just yet. But the other starting receiver is Dante Cephas, who is a transfer from, I believe it was Kent State, but don't quote me on that. I know it was a MAC school. And he has ended the season pretty strongly, but not really a whole lot of consistency there. He would be a guy I would consider if I were looking to pivot off of Lambert-Smith and still play Drew Allar. At the tight end position, Theo Johnson has declared for the draft, but he is still going to play in this game. And then Tyler Warren is going to be the other starting tight end. Penn State does run a lot of 12 personnel, so they will play both of those tight ends quite a bit. All right, so let's go ahead and switch gears now and talk about the Music City Bowl taking place between Auburn and Maryland. So this one is another interesting one, largely because of all the opt-outs and other stuff going on with both these teams. The point spread in this one is Auburn minus 6.5 points. The total is 47.5, which means the implied total is about 27 to 21 in favor of the Auburn Tigers. However, Auburn is without 3 of their best defensive players. Both of their starting corners, as well as one of their defensive linemen, are going to the NFL draft. So Auburn is a little bit shorthanded on the defensive side of the football for this one. But can Maryland take advantage of it? I do not know, because they're starting kind of a relative unknown at quarterback. Billy Edwards Jr. is going to be the starter, with Talia Tagovailoa opting out of the bowl game. I don't know that much about Billy Edwards. I do know that they would bring him in near the end of the season against Rutgers and Michigan to use as a runner, kind of like as a wildcat quarterback, or to do a quarterback sneak, or to do the tush push. In fact, I believe they did the tush push twice against Michigan. And so I don't know that much about him other than that. If he is like a true dual threat quarterback, I believe that does give him some upside at only $7,700, and it might make him a little bit of a sneaky play if he is in fact used mostly as a runner. Now on the Auburn side, so they have split quarterback snaps all season long between Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne. Personally, I was always partial to Ashford. He was more mobile. You could do more with him. I thought he was a little better. Peyton Thorne, ever since the time he's been at Michigan State, I didn't think he was that good. And I think he just was like, all Michigan State quarterbacks are not that good. They haven't had a good one since Kirk Cousins. So Peyton Thorne now, though, is the guy that's going to be playing in the bowl game, and he's going to get all the snaps. Robbie Ashford is not going to be there. Robbie Ashford has vultured touchdowns from Peyton Thorne. He's taken series from Peyton Thorne. There's no telling what Peyton Thorne's numbers would look like if Robbie Ashford weren't around the whole season. So Peyton Thorne getting a full game with nobody to steal points, I think there's actually a little bit of upside there, because they have started to use him as a runner more. He's seen at least 12 rushing attempts in each of the last 4 games. He's also had 3 games of over 25 fantasy points this season. So the upside is there, and I kind of understand playing either of these two guys. Like, when it comes to Thorne and Edwards, like, it's not pretty, it's not a sure thing, but I think that both of those guys do have a lot of upside to be played here on this slate. Now, at the running back position, I really do like the running back position for both of these teams. So Roman Hemby is like one of the better running backs in the nation that doesn't get the football. So with Billy Edwards being more of a runner than Talia Tagovailoa, I think that Maryland could go to a more run-heavy scheme, which would be very beneficial to Roman Hemby, because when you look at what he's done in games where he actually gets 12 or more carries, he's been really, really good so far this season. So when Roman Hemby gets 12 or more carries, here are those games: 26.7, 10.9, 18.3, 9.3, 34.7, and 15.2. 3 out of 6 times that is over 18 fantasy points. That is over 3 times value for his salary. That's an average of 19.5 fantasy points in those 6 games, which is well over 3 times value for his salary. So when he gets the football, he's effective. And Auburn actually surrenders 4.6 yards per carry on the ground. They had that big running game they gave up to New Mexico State in November. So I definitely think that they can be run on, and Roman Hemby is a guy that does have some upside for all of those reasons. Now, for Auburn, I also really do like Jarquez Hunter as well. He's had 3 games in a row of over 22 fantasy points in the middle of the season, but he has kind of cooled off since then, but his workload has been pretty darn consistent. But again, what I like about this Auburn offense is now there's no Robbie Ashford involved in the running game, so it could mean more usage for Jarquez Hunter, and he is a guy who is involved in the passing game as well. So even if Auburn goes down, Jarquez Hunter is still going to be out there. He's still going to be involved in the offense. And Maryland actually surrenders 3.6 yards per carry on the season, which makes them not a terrible rushing matchup. Not a good one, but not a terrible one. So I actually really do like both Hemby and Hunter at the running back position for this game. At the wide receiver position, Maryland is very intact. Their top 3 wide receivers on the season, Jayshon Jones, Ty Felton, and Caden Prather, are all here for the bowl game. Their starting tight end, Corey Dyches, did declare for the draft, so they will not be with him. But when you look at the course of the season, these 3 wide receivers have been most of who they throw to. And they've been pretty consistently good, if I must say so. Jayshon Jones and Ty Felton both have a little streak going where since Maryland's bye week, which is the last 5 games, both of them have over 9 fantasy points in every single game. You see Ty Felton's had over 4 catches in 6 straight games. That's a pretty consistent, solid workload. Caden Prather is the one who has not been the most consistent out of them, but I actually think he is the most talented of the 3 of them, and he is the cheapest now at $4,900 on DraftKings. So I think that you've got a scenario here where you can play 1 or 2 of these guys. I would prefer to play them stacked with Billy Edwards, but I do think you can play 1 or 2 of them with Billy Edwards. So when you look at what these 3 guys have done on the season, and you add in tight end Corey Dyches, those 4 guys average combined about 48 fantasy points per game. So if Billy Edwards has the same passing production that Tua Tagovailoa averaged, then that would allow for 2 of these guys to hit value if you were able to pick the right 2. Now, the question becomes, which 2 do you pick between Jones, Felton, and Prather? I don't know, but I do know with Dyches out of the equation, it's going to be a little easier to pick than if he was there. So I definitely think you can play 2 of these guys with Billy Edwards. Now, on the Auburn side, their receiving room is a little bit of a mess. So they've lost a few of their wide receivers to the portal, but they're still going to be playing a rotation at the wide receiver position, and the rotation is going to include Caleb Burton, Jay Fair, Camden Brown, Shane Hooks, and Coy Moore also. All 5 of those guys are going to play snaps at the wide receiver position. You also have Rivaldo Fairweather and Luke Deal at tight end. So even at the tight end position, you're not getting you're not getting 1 full-time player. It's going to be a lot of guys splitting snaps. Now, of all the guys that I mentioned, Burton, Fair, Brown, Hooks, Moore, Fairweather, and Deal, Caleb Burton is the only one who caught a pass against Alabama. He had 1 catch for 15 yards. All the other catches in that game went to either somebody who is in the portal or somebody who is not playing in this game. So Caleb Burton, the only one out of this Auburn receiving corps that caught a pass against Alabama. Rivaldo Fairweather is the tight end, and he is actually their leading receiver in terms of yardage on the season with only 349 yards. So I do think he would have to be in play for that reason as well. And then Jay Fair is interesting because he had a really good start to the season. He was looking like he was going to be their number 1 wideout, but he has not caught a pass since week 11 against Arkansas. However, he is listed on the bowl game depth chart, so I would assume that he is going to be out there playing and that he has not disappeared off of the face of the earth. But I think it's a little weird that he has not, kind of had any action or alerts or anything since that Arkansas game. So if I were playing anybody from the Auburn side, it'd probably be Fairweather or Burton. But like I said, it's going to be a nasty rotation. It's going to be kind of a nightmare to try to pin down which one that you want to go with. All right, that does it for the first 2 bowl games. So let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to break down the last 2. Before we get started with the Capital One Orange Bowl, I do want to mention there are a few places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter, aka X at Mike's Money Picks. I do my best to tweet out the rundown for every college football and college basketball slate where I kind of highlight some of my favorite categorical plays. If there's ever any updates for the show, I tweet them out there as well. And then I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you just reach out to me on there. So at Mike's Money Picks on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Basically, the Fantasy Corner Discord is a lot of people who play a lot of DFS, a lot of smart people. We just have a lot of good discussion for DFS, bouncing ideas off each other, talking strategy, talking lineups, and then sweating it out together and talking about the games. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great community to be a part of. We talk college football, college basketball, NFL, and NBA. And it's just a blast to be a part of. And if you're looking for people to talk DFS about, I highly recommend it. I also write a full article on the Patreon for every college football and college basketball DFS slate where I highlight my core plays as well as kind of how I am attacking and building through each slate. And there's not a whole lot of people out there who write for college football and college basketball DFS. So I do think that I give a lot of good information and can help you get better at playing DFS for those two sports. Lastly, if you were looking to try something new this season. I know there's some places where some laws are changing on January 1st. Head on over to signupexpert.com/MikesPicks. What they do at SignUpExpert is they give you the best offers and promo codes for new users for any DFS, player prop, or sportsbook site. I know Underdog is on there as well as pretty much every major sportsbook, but it will sync to your location and only show you what is available for you. So if you're looking to try something new, signupexpert.com/MikesPicks. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about this Orange Bowl. So the Capital One Orange Bowl is probably the most talked about bowl game of the entire bowl season that's not a college football playoff game. We've got Georgia taking on FSU. The current spread is Georgia -20 with a game total of 44 points. And so that is an implied total of 32-12 in favor of the Georgia Bulldogs. Y'all, I'm going to be honest. I expect this game to be a bloodbath. I expect Georgia to absolutely show up and beat the brakes off of Florida State. And there's a multitude of reasons why. So nobody is talking about how Georgia has a lot of motivation to play in this game. Yes, Georgia is not in the college football playoff, but Georgia probably rightfully feels like they're one of the four best teams in the country. And they probably want to go out and show that they're one of the four best teams in the country and that they should have gotten in that playoff. The argument might be that FSU is saying the same thing. Well, FSU's guys aren't there. FSU has had so many guys hit the transfer portal. It is a shell of their former team. It is not the FSU team that we have seen all season. Now, if your counterpoint is, well, Georgia has some guys in the portal too, Mike, well, why don't you think that affects them? Yeah, well, when you're Georgia and guys enter the portal, you're just replacing them with a bunch of other 5-stars. So Georgia is going to be running out on the field with all these 5-stars who haven't gotten to play all season and are hungry and want to be there, and FSU just has the leftovers. This would be the equivalent of, like, if you ever seen the movie The Replacements, this would be like The Replacements beating Dallas if FSU were to win this game. So I think Georgia is going to absolutely shellac them in this game, and I think Georgia is a very appealing team to target in DFS for that reason. I think Georgia is going to put up a lot of points in this game. So Georgia does have the actual implied highest total of the day at 32 points, and Carson Beck is playing quarterback for them in this game, and we've talked about him all season long, how he's kind of like a sneaky good DFS play, but we have enough of a sample size now to know that he is a touchdown-dependent DFS play. On the course of the season, Carson Beck has 5 games over 24 fantasy points. He has 2 games of those 5 that were over 30 fantasy points. Of those 5 games, he threw for 3 or more touchdowns in 4 of them. So if Carson Beck is going to throw for 3 touchdowns, he's going to give you 24 fantasy points pretty consistently. And the question is if he's going to throw for those 3 touchdowns, right? Well, if Georgia's implied 32 points, and I think they might score more than that, you got to feel like there's a chance for Carson Beck to throw 3 or more touchdowns, and Carson Beck has got to be in your player pool for that reason. Brock Glenn is going to start for FSU. He started the ACC championship game against Louisville. He is a true freshman. He was not a highly touted recruit. He was not expected to be near the field this season, and he had 1.6 fantasy points against Louisville. No disrespect to Louisville, but if you can't score against Louisville, how are you going to score against the Georgia Bulldogs? I don't know. I don't see there being a whole lot of success for Brock Glenn in this game, if I am being honest. I thought that he might have had a little bit of upside in the ACC championship game, maybe in his ability as a runner, but he ended that game with 9 attempts for -6 rushing yards. So I don't really have any faith in Brock Glenn. If you're just sitting there like, well, Mike, maybe you're being hard on the guy. Well, Georgia's defense has been an elite defense against quarterbacks all season long. UAB's Jacob Zeno had 22 fantasy points against Georgia, and Jalen Milroe of Alabama had 17 fantasy points against Georgia. Those are the two highest fantasy point totals against Georgia all season long. I don't think Brock Glenn is going to be getting to those numbers. And even if he did, I think there's better plays out there on the rest of the slate. Now, let's go ahead and talk about running backs. So, like Penn State, Georgia also employs a 50-50 split at running back over the latter half of the season. In the last 4 games, Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton have been pretty close to 50-50. In fact, Kendall Milton has had 54 carries combined in the last 4 games. Dejon Edwards has had 46 carries combined in the last 4 games. So, slight edge to Kendall Milton in that regard. In terms of fantasy scoring, Milton has been better, but it's largely been because he has 7 touchdowns in that span. Milton has averaged 22.7 fantasy points per game in that span, whereas Edwards has averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game in that span. But again, I think a large part of that difference is Edwards has 7 touchdowns in those 4 games. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Milton has 7 touchdowns in those 4 games, and Edwards only has 3 touchdowns in those 4 games. So that would be a combined 24 fantasy points, which would be 6 fantasy points a game. So it's a little bit more even than it actually is if you take out the touchdowns. But here's the thing. If touchdowns are going to be a part of the game. So if Kendall Milton's more likely to score a touchdown and Kendall Milton's been getting more carries, then Kendall Milton would be the guy that I would want in my DFS lineups over Dejon Edwards. However, we talk about this with DFS all the time, though. Sometimes a bad play becomes a good play in DFS when nobody plays him. And so if everybody knows this about Kendall Milton and nobody plays Dejon Edwards, the Dejon Edwards might have a lot of leverage as a GPP play to play him in your lineups if everybody is going to be on Kendall Milton. Now, for Florida State, they have 2 starters listed at running back. The first one is Keziah Holmes. I don't know much about him other than that he was used in blowouts this season and was fairly effective, but again, he's going up against Georgia with a skeleton crew of an offense around him. I don't think there's a whole lot of cause for upside, but he is a starting running back at $4,500. The other listed starting running back for Florida State is Ja'Kai Douglas, who is actually listed as a wide receiver on DraftKings. You may remember Ja'Kai Douglas from having a little bit of a relevant spurt of games when Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson were injured. He had 20.5 fantasy points against Pitt, and it very easily could have been 28.5 if he didn't lose a fumble in the end zone. So Ja'Kai Douglas, I actually think, is a really good athlete and a really talented player. And if there's anybody on this Georgia or Florida State offense that I'm going to play, it would probably be Ja'Kai Douglas. Just thinking about it from a coaching perspective, if you're looking to play with a backup quarterback and just backups all around, getting the ball in the hands of your best athlete in space might be the best opportunity to score points. And so if Ja'Kai Douglas is getting these little, swings and screens and checkdowns out of the backfield, those add up in fantasy. And so I think Ja'Kai Douglas might be a guy that might be worth looking at. Now, at the rest of the wide receiver position for Florida State, they are playing a largely unproven cast of characters. Poitier, Williamson, and Hill were listed as the 3 starters on the depth chart. Destin Hill was a big-time recruit coming into Florida State. He has been hurt most of the season. He might be the most talented receiver they have. I'm probably not playing any Florida State wide receivers. On the Georgia side, I do not expect Brock Bowers to play in this game. I don't know why Brock Bowers would, in fact, play in this game because he pretty much has the highest draft stock that a tight end could have. He's right up there in like the Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson category of top 10 draft pick as a tight end. So I don't see any incentive for him to play. If he does play, I think he's a good play. If he does not play, then I think that gives a lot more upside to the other Georgia receivers, specifically Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, and Dominic Lovett. And I think you will also get more work from Oscar Delp at the tight end position if Brock Bowers is in fact out of this game. If I were to play one of them, I would want to play McConkey without Bowers. I think that would be the combination that I would want the most, is for Bowers to miss this game and then allow me to play Ladd McConkey because his production in games where Brock Bowers was out was really solid. In the the games where Brock Bowers either left early or missed that McConkey played in, 28.5, 16.5, 19.2. So pretty solid numbers there from McConkey. Rosenby-Jack Saint got a lot of momentum as the season ended. He was not super consistent, but I could see him being in play again. And then Dominic Lovett operating out of the slot is another guy that did well when Brock Bowers was out. So if I were having my choice, like I said, I would want Bowers to miss this game and play McConkey. If Bowers is in, I would probably just play Beck and Bowers. Now, before I do continue, though, I feel like I was a little harsh on FSU. I think that if I were an FSU fan, I would be livid about not getting to be in the college football playoff, considering that they were undefeated and did everything they could do. But speaking from the perspective of a Texas fan, I would have wanted to see FSU in that playoff because I don't think they're that good. So it's just really, it's a lose-lose situation with a 4-team playoff. And I'm glad we're going to a 12-team playoff next year, so that way no other team can go through what FSU has had to go through in the last month, because believe me, if I were an FSU fan, I would just be sick to my stomach just at the whole ordeal and how many guys they have in the portal. And now they have to play Georgia, and it's just not a great situation for them. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the last game of the day, which is Toledo taking on Wyoming, the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl, which is going to be broadcast on the CW. So, the network that brings you All-American and Live Golf and Riverdale is broadcasting a bowl game. So pretty cool there. But anyway, I actually think this is a somewhat appealing game to get to. The spread right now is Wyoming minus 3.5. The total is 44.5, which is coincidentally the lowest of the day. The Orange Bowl is actually half a point lower than that one. But I actually think that this one has a better chance at shooting out than any of the other two, just because of the teams that are involved. The implied total is 24-21 Wyoming, with it expected to be a close game. Like I could definitely see this one getting to be a shootout. Now for Toledo, they had a really good quarterback in Dequan Finn, and he hit the transfer portal, and he is now at Baylor. So they will be starting Tucker Gleason in this game. He has been Finn's backup the last 2 seasons, and he was not bad in 2022 when he got to play. He got to start 3 games in place of an injured Dequan Finn. He put up 18, 24, and 51 DraftKings points in those 3 games. Yes, you heard me correctly. He had a 51 DraftKings points performance. So in my opinion, sitting at only $5,800 on DraftKings on this slate, he has the chance to be the best points per dollar play on this slate. He is a dual threat quarterback who can give you some points with his legs as well. And so I really think that Tucker Gleason is a really good play. The irony of it is, though, is I don't even think you need to play. Like, you don't need to save the salary to play Tucker Gleason. There's just not a whole lot of guys on this slate that I am rushing to put into my lineups. And so if I play Tucker Gleason, I don't know what that even ends up doing for the rest of my lineup. I guess I could play whatever running backs and wide receivers I wanted comfortably, but I don't think it would be necessarily like, oh, you have to play Gleason to save all this salary. Like, I don't think that that's something that is the case, but I do think that he is a very solid play in his own right. Now, Andrew Peasley is the quarterback for Wyoming, and I don't mind him as a play either. He has 5 games this season over 23 fantasy points, which gives him a pretty solid ceiling. Like I said, I think this game has sneaky shootout potential. Toledo has played in some shootouts in the MAC. The Wyoming offense has put up some points in the Mountain West. It would not shock me to see this game be the one that goes crazy and just have everybody scratching their heads at the end of the day thinking, dang, why didn't I see that coming? Now, for the running back position, Toledo has one of the trickiest situations on the slate. Penny Boone, aka Baby Bus, they call him at Toledo, is their starter, but he's entered the transfer portal. But it's weird because they had released the bowl game depth chart before Penny Boone entered the transfer portal, and they haven't updated it. And he hasn't said that he's playing or not playing in the bowl. Toledo hasn't said that he's playing or not playing in the bowl. So I don't know if Penny Boone is playing in this bowl game or not. What I do know is that he is actively in the portal, and he's a really good running back. And so at $8,000 on DraftKings, he is the slate's most expensive running back, but for good reason. He gets the ball a lot. He ran for 1,400 yards on the season with 16 touchdowns. He has multiple 35 fantasy point performances this season. Penny Boone is objectively the best skill position play on the slate if he is in fact active for this game. If he is not active, then I will happily late swap down to Jacquez Stewart, who has been the backup all season long, and he's actually been pretty effective as well. And if you're wondering about the matchup, Wyoming's a pretty solid matchup. They give up 4.2 yards per carry on the ground on the season. So I definitely think Jacquez Stewart is a guy that I would be willing to play if Penny Boone were out. I can tell you by doing a quick bit of research as much as I could, looking at Prize Picks and Underdog and where their lines are set, they do not have a line available for Penny Boone. They do have a line set for Jacquez Stewart, and it would imply that he is starting this game. So if I'm being totally honest, if I'm building my lineups and I put Penny Boone in there, I would be a-okay just late swapping Boone to Stewart, or maybe putting in some other pieces from the Georgia-Florida State game so that I could late swap some other guys up. That's just how I see it. But I do think Penny Boone is the best play on the entire slate. Now on the Wyoming side, Harrison Whaley is the workhorse back. He is the starter. He's pretty good too. He averages 15.9 fantasy points on the season, but he actually left a few games early, missed a few games as well. So he is pretty solid. Like, he averages over 15 carries per game in games that he plays. He had 20 fantasy points against Texas, 26 against App State, 28 against New Mexico. So the ceiling is there for Harrison Whaley, and I think he is a very solid play as well. I think if I were starting a lineup that I was looking to build the most upside with, I would probably start it with Tucker Gleason at quarterback, Harrison Whaley at running back, and then probably one of the Georgia backs as well. And then just filling out the receivers with whoever I wanted from there. Now, at the wide receiver position, this is where this game gets a little tricky. So Toledo, they really only throw to two guys, Jerwan Newton and Junior Vandeross. The question is, which one does it end up being? Well, they've kind of alternated good games, that they've alternated games scoring touchdowns. It's just been super unpredictable for the two of them. And I think if I were building multiple lineups with Tucker Gleason at quarterback, I would be playing one of Newton or Vandeross in every single one of those lineups. I probably would not be playing both of them together because, again, Gleason is a dual threat quarterback. I don't know if there's going to be enough passing volume to go around to feed both of these guys in the same game. Anthony Torres is their tight end. He is also a very solid play. He plays almost every snap for them. Just hasn't been the most productive player over the course of the season. On the Wyoming side, they really only throw to one guy, and that is Wyatt Weiland. He has only averaged 9.9 fantasy points on the season, but it's because he's had some dud games. He's had some big games as well. He's had 5 games, over 15 fantasy points. So Wyatt Weiland, definitely a guy that you can get into your lineups. And if you're playing Andrew Peasley, the Wyoming quarterback, I would definitely be stacking him with Wyatt Weiland. Now their tight end, Trayton Welch, is also available to play, and their wide receiver 2 on the season has been Ayer Asante. Asante has declared for the draft, but he is playing in this game. So if I definitely think that this game would probably, in my opinion, be one of the easiest ones to stack up because of the cheap price tag on Gleason and because there's so few wide receivers that are actually going to play snaps for both of these teams. I think that the Toledo-Wyoming game is actually one of the more appealing game environments on the slate, even though it has the second to lowest points total available. That one was tricky. All right. That does it for the Saturday, December 30th college football DFS slate, and that does it for this episode. Remember, if you like what you see here on this video, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review on the audio feed. It really does help me out a lot. It does not fall on deaf ears, and I really do appreciate it. And while you're here, hit the subscribe button. That way you can be notified when new episodes drop, and you can be here for the January 1st college football bowl game slate, where I finally get to talk about my Texas Longhorns being in the college football playoff. And then you can come back for the NFL episodes. Remember, week 17 episode is going to be going audio only shortly after this one uploads. And then you can also get the college basketball content and PGA Tour content that's going to start back up next week as well. And remember, if you want more from me, you got me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. Link to the Fantasy Corner Discord is in the description, and the articles are on the Patreon as well. All right, that does it for this episode, y'all. So we only have 2 more big slates of college football season, so let's make them 2 good ones. Hopefully I was able to give you guys some good information here on this episode that is going to help you build those lineups and help you pick some winners. So best of luck to you guys on this Saturday slate. Best of luck to you guys the rest of the way. Thank you guys for listening and watching to this point, and I will see you next time.